Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Thought for the Day. I recalled yesterday a holiday in the Alsace region of France and what I learned from a visit to the Bread Museum in the lovely village of Orwelaire. A year or so later, we took another holiday in France, this time to the French Alps. We stayed at a village high in the Alps called Notre-Dame de Bellecombe. In the winter, it's a popular ski resort, but in summer, it becomes a base for sightseeing and hiking. Our time in the Alsace had been restful and trouble-free, but the trip to the Alps was plagued with one mishap after another, including my wife losing a crown and turning her ankle. I also accidentally knocked over a cheap ornamental clock in a gift shop, and I was instantly regaled by the owner, who insisted loudly that I pay for it on the spot. And then we had a minor collision at a roundabout with one of the locals, who called a gendarme. Fortunately, the gendarme showed no interest at all, puffing away on his cigarette. But there were some high spots too, going up Mont Blanc, and a memorable visit to a nearby monastery called the Abbaye Notre-Dame de Tamié, a community of around 30 monks whose way of life stresses the importance of silence and contemplation. They welcome visitors to their community. There's a hostel there for people who want to take time out on retreat. And there's also a shop which sells the community's main product, Abbaye de Tamier cheese, which is their main source of income. As we walked up the long path to the main monastery buildings, one of the monks joined us and walked alongside us. Between us, we got a conversation going, and he invited us to join him in the monastery chapel for the afternoon time of meditation, where we stayed for some time. There were several monks present, but also a sprinkling of visitors like ourselves. The sense of peace and silence in that sacred place in which prayer had been offered for so many years was overwhelming. When I recall that chapel, the words of the hymn come to mind. Be still, for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One, is here. Now, I readily admit that I am not a naturally contemplative person, but I could only be moved by that experience of the divine and the all-encompassing silence that permeated that place. In such a busy, noisy world as ours, it's so important to appreciate the power of silence and what God may be saying to us through it. I'm reminded by this episode of the Old Testament story of the prophet Elijah. After his stunning success in routing the prophets of Baal and reasserting the supremacy of the Lord God as the long drought over the land ended, you would have thought that Elijah would have been elated and his confidence sky high. Not a bit of it. He succumbs to fears of the king's threats and descends into what we would call depression, certainly a midlife crisis, and he doubts whether his life has any purpose. To escape it all, he flees to the mountains, and there God speaks to him. Go out, he tells Elijah, and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. There then follow noisy and powerful natural phenomena, violent winds like tornadoes, an earthquake, and fire. But after each of these, the storyteller adds, the Lord was not in the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. But in the eeriness of the sheer silence that follows, Elijah perceives God calling him, a still, small voice. And it's only after he's heard that his mood and confidence are restored and he finds the strength to carry on. Silence is a very restorative thing. In it we can discern the presence of God. We sometimes sing a chorus, which we should make our prayer for today. Speak, Lord, in the silence, while I wait on thee. Hushed my heart to listen in expectancy. That prayer is really a question for each of us to ask ourselves. Are we listening enough in our lives for God's still, small voice? I will always associate the story of Elijah with the Abbaye at Notre-Dame de Tamié, and I am grateful for that chance meeting with a monk for opening my eyes to the value and power of silence. Tomorrow, back in England and its smallest Anglican cathedral.